Beneath the indifferent gaze of a sickle moon, the snow whispered secrets of forgotten mercy to the forsaken. Raven Lorn trudged through the ankle-deep drifts, her breath forming fragile ghosts in the biting wind that clawed at the hem of her threadbare cloak. The northern wilds of Eldridge stretched before her like a vast, unyielding shroud, where the pines stood sentinel, their branches heavy with ice that cracked like brittle bones under the weight of winter's wrath. She had been cast out at dawn, the pack's verdict echoing in her ears even now, the Omega who could not heal, who bore no scent strong enough to bind, who dreamed too wildly of the goddess's touch. Useless, the Beta enforcers had snarled, their eyes averted as they shoved her beyond the warded stones of the village. No trial, no plea, just the cold finality of rejection, her small bundle of possessions clutched to her chest like a shield against the void. The air smelled of pine resin and distant smoke, a faint tang of hearth fires from the homes she could no longer call her own. Raven's boots sank into the powder with each laborious step, the chill seeping through the worn leather to numb her toes. She was no stranger to solitude. As an Omega, she had always lingered on the fringes, her quiet nature mistaken for weakness. But this exile cut deeper, a wound that festered with every gust that whipped her dark hair across her face. Why her? The question gnawed like frostbite, unspoken in the pack's hurried banishment. She had tended the sick, mended the torn hides, offered her hands where others turned away. Yet in the hierarchy of fangs and fury, compassion was no currency. They had left her to the wilds, where rogue wolves and rival clans prowled, her fate a footnote in their survival. Her fingers, red and chapped, brushed the moonstone brooch pinned to her cloak, a relic from her mother, its pale glow dulled by years of neglect. It had been a gift on the night of her first moonblood, whispered to hold the essence of the goddess's tears, a token for those who walked unseen paths. Raven had worn it faithfully, though it brought her no favor, no mate's claim. Now it felt like a cruel jest, heavy against her skin as if mocking her isolation. The wind howled through the pass, carrying the faint, mournful weavos of distant wolves, a chorus that stirred something primal in her chest, a longing for pack, for warmth, for the firelit halls she had known since birth. As the sun dipped low, painting the snow in hues of bruised purple, Raven crested a ridge and paused, her lungs burning. Below lay the frozen river, its surface a mirror cracked by hidden currents, flanked by jagged rocks that gleamed like teeth in the fading light. She had no plan, only the instinct to press on, away from the scent markers that once defined her world. Hunger gnawed at her belly, but she rationed the last strip of dried venison, chewing slowly to savor the salt and sinew. The cold was a living thing here, wrapping around her like an unwanted lover, pressing until her thoughts blurred into memories. She remembered the rejection's sting most vividly, the alpha's mate, heavy with child, turning from her in the healer's den. "Your touch brings no peace," the woman had hissed, while the pack elders nodded, their faces etched with the pragmatic cruelty of survival. Raven had knelt then, as she always did, offering silent solace, but they saw only failure. Banished for dreaming of gifts unproven, for visions in the night of silver threads binding broken souls. The goddess had marked her, or so the old tales promised, but the wilds cared little for promises. Descending the ridge, her foot slipped on a patch of black ice, sending her sprawling into a drift that swallowed her to the waist. The impact jarred her bones, and for a moment, panic surged. Visions of burial under the white, unseen and unremembered. She clawed free, gasping, the moonstone brooch catching on a thorned branch that tore her sleeve. Blood welled, a thin red line against her pale skin, warm for an instant before the cold claimed it. She pressed her glove to the cut, tasting salt on her lips from unshed tears. Strength, she thought, was not in claw or fang, but in rising when the world willed you buried. What was mercy, if not this stubborn persistence against the storm? Night fell swiftly, the moon rising full and pitiless, casting long shadows that danced like specters across the snow. Raven found shelter in a shallow cave, its mouth framed by icicles that wept slow drips onto the stone floor. She kindled a small fire with flint and tinder from her bundle, the flames leaping hungrily, their orange glow pushing back the dark. The heat was a balm, thawing the ache in her limbs, though it could not touch the deeper frost in her heart. As she huddled close, staring into the embers, the wind outside carried a new sound, not the howl of the wild, but something broken, a faint whimper that pierced the night like a blade. Her head snapped up, ears straining. It came again, closer now, mingled with the crunch of paws on snow. Raven's pulse quickened, instincts warring between fear and the Omega's innate pull toward the vulnerable. She doused the fire with snow, plunging the cave into moonlit gloom, and peered out. Shadows moved in the tree line, small forms stumbling through the drifts, 3 of them huddled together, their coats matted and thin. Pups, she realized with a jolt, no more than 4 winters old, their eyes wide with terror in the silver light. They were not wild. The scent of royalty clung to them, faint but unmistakable, musk and iron, the mark of the Alpha King's line. Yet they moved wrong, halting and pained, as if their bodies betrayed them. Raven's breath caught. Everyone knew the tale. King Fenrir Drake's cursed whelps, born unable to shift, shunned as harbingers of weakness in a realm where form was fate. The pack recoiled from them, whispering of divine disfavor, leaving them to nursemaids' pity or the wild's mercy. One pup, the smallest with fur like midnight, lifted its head and met her gaze. In that moment, under the moon's unblinking eye, Raven felt the brooch warm against her chest, a pulse like a second heartbeat. She stepped forward, the snow yielding softly, her rejection forgotten in the face of their quiet despair. Raven's heart thudded like a war drum in the silence. The moonstone brooch pulsing warmer now, an insistent throb against her ribs that drowned out the wind's lament. The pups huddled closer in the snow, their small bodies quivering not from the cold alone, but from a deeper fracture, a wrongness that twisted the air around them like smoke from a dying fire. She knew their names without knowing, as if the goddess whispered them on the frost-kissed breeze. Ino, the bold one with eyes like storm clouds. Vale, sleek and watchful, her fur dusted silver. Soren, the midnight shadow, smallest and most fragile, his gaze locking onto hers with a plea that pierced her exile-forged armor. She knelt slowly, the snow yielding like a reluctant confessor, her knees sinking into the powder until it cradled her as a mother's lap might have long ago. The scent of them enveloped her, milk and fear, undercut by the royal musk that no curse could fully erase, a reminder of thrones and bloodlines forged in the fires of ancient wars. "Come," she murmured, her voice a thread of silk in the night, soft against the crunch of ice under her palms. They hesitated, ears flattening, tails tucked in the instinctive recoil of the shunned. The pack's whispers echoed in her mind, crippled whelps, harbingers of downfall, their human forms locked away since birth, bodies refusing the shift that marked every wolf's right. No claws, no fur beyond these frail pupskins, just endless pity and averted eyes in the halls of Eldridge's frozen keep. Fear coiled in Raven's gut, a serpent of doubt. What if her touch brought them harm, as it had so many before? The enforcer's scorn replayed. Useless Omega, dreamer of impossible graces. Yet the brooch burned, its glow seeping through her cloak like moonlight through cracks in a crypt, urging her forward. She extended her arms, chapped hands open, palms upturned in the ancient gesture of sanctuary. Soren moved first, a tentative crawl through the drifts, his whimpers fracturing the quiet like cracking ice. He pressed against her side, his warmth a fragile spark against the night's maw, and Raven gathered him close, her fingers threading through his matted fur with the tenderness of one who knew rejection's bite. Ino followed, bold despite the tremor in his limbs, nuzzling into her other side with a sigh that carried the weight of unspoken isolation. Vale lingered a breath longer, her eyes searching Raven's face for deceit, but the pull was inexorable, an Omega's call to the broken, woven into the stars above. She tumbled into the embrace at last, the three of them a tangled knot of fur and frost, their breaths mingling in ragged harmony. Raven held them, her own tears freezing on her lashes, the cold seeping deeper now, but irrelevant against this fragile trust. The wind hushed, as if the wilds themselves held breath, and the moon hung low, its sickle curve slicing the horizon like a blade poised for judgment. Then it began, a tremor, subtle at first, rippling through Saran's frame like a shiver turned seismic. His body arched, bones shifting with audible cracks that echoed off the pines, sharp as splintering wood under an axe. Raven froze, her arms tightening instinctively, fear and wonder warring in her chest. Fur receded in waves, revealing pale skin etched with the first hints of muscle, his form elongating, twisting from pup to boy in a blur of agony and release. A cry tore from his throat, half pain, half triumph, as his eyes, now fully human, wide and golden, met hers. Eno convulsed next, his shift fiercer, limbs stretching with pops that rent the air, blood flecking the snow in tiny crimson stars where skin split and reformed. He emerged, gasping, a lad of fierce lines and tousled dark hair, clutching at Raven's cloak as if she were the anchor in his storm. Vale's transformation was the quietest, a graceful unfolding, her body shimmering under the moon's gaze like water over stones. She rose on unsteady legs, a girl with braids of silver blonde and eyes that held the depth of forgotten seas, her hand finding Raven's in silent gratitude. The air thickened with the scent of fresh blood and rebirth, metallic and vital, mingling with the pine's resin to paint the night in visceral strokes. Raven's pulse roared in her ears, the brooch now a furnace against her skin, its light pulsing in time with their newfound heartbeats. What gift was this? Not healing, as the pack had demanded, but awakening, unlocking souls sealed by some cruel lunar whim. From the shadows beyond the tree line, a low growl rumbled, deeper than thunder, laced with pain and fury. The pups stiffened, their small faces turning toward the sound, recognition dawning like dawn's first bleed. Raven's instincts screamed retreat, but her arms remained a cage of comfort around them. A massive form emerged. Staggering from the gloom, a wolf of midnight pelt, scarred by fresh wounds, gashes weeping dark blood that steamed on the snow. He collapsed to one knee as he shifted, the change fluid yet labored, revealing a man of towering frame and haunted eyes. King Fenrir Drake, his crown of iron antlers absent, his royal furs torn and bloodied, breath ragged as a bellows in forge winds. His gaze swept the scene, locking on the pups, his pups, now human, whole, their forms no longer cursed prisons. Shock etched his features, deepening the lines of guilt that had carved him like rivers through stone. "You," he rasped, voice gravel and grief, rising unsteadily, his broad chest heaving under a tunic rent by claw marks. The air crackled with his alpha presence, a storm contained. Yet Raven felt no urge to bow. Only the brooch's warmth, a shield against his intensity. Fear flickered in her, mingled with a curiosity that bordered on defiance. Who was this king to claim what she had freed? The pups cried out, "Father!" and scrambled toward him, but Fenrir's eyes remained on her, probing, as if seeing through flesh to the lunar thread that bound them all. In that gaze, Raven glimpsed his fracture, the weight of a throne built on duty, the shame of whelps deemed worthless, the exile he too had fled in pursuit of redemption. The connection sparked, instinctive and unwelcome, a pull she denied even as it rooted in her bones. He stepped closer, blood dripping from his side, staining the snow red, and extended a hand, not in command, but in wary alliance. The night held its breath, the moon witnessing the first weave of fates entwined. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments of the night they find you. The cave's mouth gaped like a wound in the mountainside, its jagged edges framed by icicles that wept in the moon's indifferent light, dripping slow rhythms onto the frozen earth. Raven's arms tightened around the pups as Fenrir's shadow loomed, his extended hand hovering in the charged air, blood from his wounds tracing dark veins across the snow. The metallic tang of it mingled with the pups' fresh scents, now fully human, their skin warm and flushed from the shift, eyes wide with the miracle of their own forms. Ino clung to her side, his small fingers digging into her cloak. Vale buried her face against Raven's shoulder, a quiet sob escaping. Soren, ever the fragile one, reached tentatively toward his father, bridging the space between exile and king. Fenrir's eyes, stormy gray flecked with gold, held hers without command, a raw vulnerability cracking the Alpha's iron facade. "Who are you?" he murmured, voice rough as gravel under boot, laced with the awe of a man who had bartered his soul for duty. Raven felt the brooch pulse again, its warmth seeping into her chest like liquid silver, urging her to speak truths she scarcely understood. She rose slowly, the pups rising with her, their weights a grounding anchor against the pull of his presence. "Raven Lorn," she said, her words steady despite the tremor in her limbs, an omega of no pack, cast out for dreams the wilds alone heed. No bow, no submission, the moonstone's glow shielded her, a quiet defiance born of too many rejections. He nodded once, the motion heavy with unspoken burdens, and withdrew his hand, not in offense, but as if testing the fragile thread between them. Distant howls pierced the night, not the wild's chorus but something sharper, organized, pursuers, their baying laced with the fervor of betrayal. Fenrir's head snapped toward the sound, his body tensing, scars across his broad shoulders, pulling taut under the torn tunic. "Rivals," he growled low, the word vibrating through the air like thunder's prelude. "The eastern clans, scenting weakness in my line. They track the pups from the keep, thought to claim them as trophies or worse." His gaze flicked to the children, softening for a heartbeat, guilt etching deeper lines around his mouth. He had failed them. She saw it in the slump of his frame, the king who ruled with mercy's blade but could not spare his own blood from shame. Raven's instincts flared, the Omega's core urging protection over flight. The cave beckoned, its depths promising shadow and stone against the encroaching threat. "Inside," she whispered, gathering the pups closer, their small hands clutching hers as if she were the weave holding their newfound shapes intact. Fenrir followed without question, his massive form ducking under the low entrance, the scent of his blood, coppery, vital, filling the narrow space. They moved deeper, the air growing thick and cool, walls slick with frost that glittered like scattered stars under the faint moonlight filtering through cracks above. Raven kindled another fire with practiced hands, striking flint against steel from her bundle, flames blooming orange and fierce, casting flickering shadows that danced like restless spirits. The pups huddled near the warmth, Eno poking at the embers with a stick, his boyish curiosity undimmed by the night's chaos. Vale traced patterns in the dirt, her fingers steady now, whispering names of stars she claimed to remember from dreams. Soran curled against Raven's lap, his head on her thigh, breaths evening into sleep's fragile rhythm. Fenrir sat across the blaze, his wounds stark in the firelight, gashes from claws that spoke of a skirmish evaded, not won. He tore a strip from his cloak, binding the deepest cut on his side, but his eyes never left her, probing the quiet Omega who had unraveled his curse with a simple embrace. "Why them?" he asked at last, voice a rumble softened by the flame's crackle. The shift. It's impossible. The seers swore the goddess had turned from my bloodline, punishing my father's wars. Pain threaded his words, the weight of a throne inherited through rivers of blood, where every decree balanced mercy against the pack's survival. Raven met his gaze over the fire, the brooch's heat a steady companion, reminding her of her own banishment, the pack's scorn for her unproven gifts, the healer's touch that mended flesh but not the fractures of the soul. Not punishment, she replied, her tone laced with the night's poetry, but waiting. They were locked away, like seeds under eternal winter. I felt them calling through the moon's veil. Empathy stirred in the silence between them, a bridge forming over the chasm of their wounds. Fenrir's hand stilled on his bandage, his expression fracturing, grief for the years stolen, the shunning he had endured in silence to shield them from worse. I recoiled too, he confessed, the admission raw, eyes dropping to the flames. Not from fear, but shame. A king who sires broken heirs. What mercy can I claim for others? The words hung heavy, smoke curling around his form like ghosts of decisions past. Raven reached across the fire, not touching, but offering her palm in echo of her earlier gesture to the pups. The air hummed with it, the instinctive bond of Alpha and Omega, not in submission, but in shared fracture, her rejection mirroring his guilt, two exiles forging alliance in the wild's heart. Outside, the howls grew nearer, paws crunching snow in relentless pursuit, the rival clan's torches blooming like malignant eyes on the ridge. Fenrir rose, positioning himself at the cave's mouth, his form a sentinel of muscle and resolve. But he glanced back, a silent invitation. Raven nodded, drawing the pups behind an outcrop of stone, her body shielding theirs as the brooch flared brighter, its light a ward against the dark. The first snarls echoed at the entrance, shadows lunging, 3 betas of the eastern pack, fur bristling, eyes red with conquest's hunger. Fenrir met them with a roar that shook the walls, claws extending in a blur, blood spraying as he tore into the lead wolf, his movements a dance of controlled fury. Raven's heart pounded, the scent of battle, sweat, iron, fear, flooding the cave, but she whispered to the pups, her voice a lullaby against the chaos. Hold to the moon's promise. She sees the hidden strong. Eno's eyes gleamed with budding defiance. Vale's hand squeezed hers with trust reborn. Saran's small form pressed close, unafraid now. One attacker broke through, lunging toward them, but Raven rose, the brooch's power surging unbidden, a wave of lunar calm emanating from her touch as she barred the way, the wolf hesitating, whimpering before Fenrir's final strike felled it. The skirmish ended in ragged breaths, the rivals' bodies steaming on the cold stone, the night reclaiming its silence. Fenrir returned, bloodied but unbowed, collapsing beside the fire with a nod of profound respect. "You guarded what is mine," he said, voice thick with the bond's first threads, empathy blooming into something deeper, a recognition that her compassion was no weakness, but the key to his fractured realm. Raven felt it too, the pull resisted yet undeniable, her exile's chill thawing in the warmth of shared purpose. The moon watched through the cracks, silver light bathing them all, as the cave became not just refuge, but the cradle of fates intertwining. The fire's embers pulsed like a dying heart in the cave's shadowed throat, casting elongated shadows that writhed across the frost-veined walls, mirroring the turmoil stirring within Raven's soul. The metallic reek of blood lingered heavy in the air, mingling with the acrid smoke that curled upward, seeking escape through unseen fissures in the stone. Fenrir slumped against the rough-hewn wall, his chest rising and falling in labored rhythm, the fresh gashes on his arms seeping crimson trails that pooled in the dips of his palms. The pups nestled closer to her, their small bodies warm now, no longer prisons of unshifted frailty, but vessels of newfound life. Eno's fingers tracing idle patterns in the dirt, Vale's head resting on Raven's knee, Soren's breaths soft and even, as if the night's violence had been a mere dream chased away by dawn's promise. Raven's hands trembled as she tore strips from her own cloak, pressing them to Fenrir's wounds with a gentleness born of exile's quiet endurance. The moonstone brooch, that unyielding sentinel against her heart, thrummed hotter than the flames, its glow seeping through the fabric like moonlight bleeding into twilight. She had felt it before, in fleeting visions during her pack's scornful nights, whispers of silver threads weaving through the dark, binding the fractured to wholeness. But this awakening in the pups was no mere mending of flesh. It was a shattering of seals, a lunar decree etched in bone and blood. Her touch had unlocked them, drawn forth the wolf forms hidden since birth, as if the goddess herself had lent her voice through Raven's palms. Fenrir's gaze, sharp as a blade tempered in grief, fixed on her as she worked, his stormy eyes reflecting the fire's dance. "It was you," he said, the words low and weighted, carrying the gravity of a king unmade. Not a question, but a revelation, his voice cracking like ice under pressure. He shifted slightly, wincing as the bandage tightened, but his hand caught hers mid-motion, gentle, not commanding, the calluses of a warrior's grip rough against her chapped skin. In that contact, a spark ignited, not of alpha dominance, but of shared essence, a current that raced up her arm and pooled in her chest, where the brooch flared brighter, illuminating the veins beneath her skin like rivers of quicksilver. She pulled back instinctively, the cave's chill rushing in to fill the space, but the connection lingered, an invisible tether humming with the night's primal music, the distant drip of melting icicles, the faint crackle of embers, the pup's soft sighs weaving through it all. "I don't understand it fully," Raven confessed, her voice a whisper threaded with wonder and fear, eyes dropping to the brooch as if it held the answers in its pale facets. "The pack called me dreamer, useless for lacking the healer's fire. But in the wilds, under the moon's eye, it stirs, something ancient, like the goddess's breath on frozen souls." Memories flooded her, the visions that had earned her banishment, dreams of shadowed figures locked in eternal winter, waiting for a key forged in compassion's quiet forge. She had always sensed it, this gift not of claw or command, but of awakening, the rare lunar mark of the Pathfinder, whispered in old scrolls as the one who unravels curses woven by fate's cruel hand. Fenrir's expression fractured, the lines of his face deepening in the firelight, guilt's shadows playing across the scars that mapped his years of rule. He had borne the weight of his pup's affliction like a crown of thorns, the Eastern clan's whispers of weakness fueling betrayals that clawed at his throne. Wars waged in mercy's name, yet his own blood shunned as omens of downfall, recoiled from in halls where loyalty was measured in fangs and fury. "The seers foretold a key," he murmured, his free hand brushing Saran's hair, the boy's form now solid and real, no longer a ghost of potential. Not of iron or blood, but of the moon's hidden grace, a soul who sees the broken not as ruin, but as vessels awaiting the tide. His eyes lifted to hers, piercing through the veil of her doubt, recognition dawning like the first crack of light on a storm-lashed sea. "You are she, the Pathfinder, the one to awaken what the stars have sealed." The words hung in the air, heavy as the snow's burden on ancient pines, and Raven felt the brooch's power surge anew, a wave that rippled outward, touching the pups in subtle waves. Eno stirred, his eyes opening to reveal a golden gleam, not just of wolf, but of insight, a faint vision flickering in his gaze, echoes of paths untrod in the northern wilds. Vale sat up, her small hand pressing to the stone floor, and for a heartbeat, the cave's shadows shifted, revealing hidden crevices like veins of silver ore, secrets the earth had guarded. Soren, the fragile one, reached for the brooch, his touch eliciting a soft glow that bathed them all in ethereal light, mending a shallow cut on Fenrir's arm with a warmth that defied the cold. Tears pricked Raven's eyes, hot against the cave's frost, the revelation crashing over her like a blizzard's fury. Her exile not punishment, but pilgrimage, her rejection the forge that tempered this gift. Yet doubt lingered, a serpent in the garden of this miracle. What price would the goddess demand for such power? The air thickened, charged with the scent of pine and blood, the moon's light filtering stronger now through the cracks, as if affirming the truth. Fenrir leaned closer, his presence a bulwark against her inner storm, the bond between them deepening, not in passion's rush, but in the slow burn of mutual salvation. "You are the key to my destiny," he said, voice resonant with the weight of thrones and trials, and perhaps to mine own redemption. Outside, the wind howled anew, carrying the faint bay of distant pursuers, but within the cave, a fragile peace held, the revelation weaving them tighter under the lunar gaze. Raven's heart ached with the beauty of it, the pain of paths crossed in blood and snow. Knowing this gift would demand choices sharper than any claw, mercy over might, awakening over annihilation. The fire popped, sending sparks skyward, and in that moment she glimpsed the threads of fate. Her hand, the pup's wholeness, the king's fractured crown, all bound by the moonstone's unyielding light. Comment Luna if you'd walk through the storm for someone who saw your worth. The moon's sickle had sharpened to a blade by dawn, slicing through the cave's fractured ceiling to paint the stone in veins of silver and shadow as if the goddess herself etched judgments into the rock. Raven's breath caught in her throat, the brooch's relentless throb a counterpoint to the distant rumble of approaching thunder. Not storm clouds, but the thunder of paws and snarls, the Eastern clan's vanguard, cresting the ridge like a tide of fangs and fury. The air inside the cave grew thick with the scent of impending blood, metallic and primal, overlaying the fading warmth of the fire's embers that now smoldered like dying stars in the gray light. Fenrir rose with a predator's grace, his wounds bandaged but unhealed, the crimson stains on his tunic a map of battles unfinished. His eyes, shadowed by the weight of revelations past, met Raven's across the huddled forms of the pups, who stirred uneasily, their small faces etched with the innocence of newfound shapes now threatened by the world's cruelty. Eno clutched a jagged stone, his boyish defiance flickering like the last sparks. Vale's fingers intertwined with Saran's, their bond a silent ward against the encroaching dark. "They come for the throne's fracture," Fenrir said, his voice a low growl that vibrated through the stone floor, stirring dust like ancient ghosts. "My brother's shadow, Trajan, the Eastern Alpha, whispers of my weakness to rally the disloyal. He seeks the pups as proof of the bloodline's curse, to shatter my rule and claim Eldridge in war's name." Raven's heart clenched, the brooch flaring hot against her skin, its light pulsing in rhythm with the howls that swelled outside, a chorus of betrayal, laced with the triumphant bay of wolves who scented vulnerability. She had glimpsed this in her visions, fragments of silver threads snapping under the weight of ambition. Trajan, Fenrir's half-brother, born of a rival union, his heart poisoned by the old wars where mercy was deemed frailty. The pack's past loomed now, not as distant lore, but as flesh and claw, converging on this fragile sanctuary. Her own exile echoed in the din, the beta enforcers who had cast her out, their faces blurring with Trajan's spies, all recoiling from the broken, yet hungry for power's illusion of strength. Fenrir moved to the cave's mouth, his silhouette a bastion of muscle and resolve, but he paused, glancing back with eyes that held not command, but a plea forged in guilt's fire. "Stay with them," he urged, the words rough yet tender, the Alpha's instinct yielding to the bond they had woven in blood and moonlight. Raven nodded, drawing the pups deeper into the shadows, her arms a circle of quiet defiance. The wind whipped through the entrance, carrying the crunch of snow under heavy paws, the metallic tang of drawn blades, iron and bone forged for kinslaying. She pressed her palm to the brooch, willing its power to shield, but doubt gnawed at her core. Was this gift awakening or annihilation? The Pathfinder's mark promised paths unveiled, yet what if it led only to rivers of red? The confrontation erupted like a storm breaking, snarls and clashes reverberating off the walls, shaking loose icicles that shattered on the floor in crystalline shards. Fenrir met the first wave alone, his roar a thunderclap that scattered lesser betas, claws raking through fur and flesh, blood spraying in arcs that steamed on the cold stone. But Trajan emerged from the fray, a hulking form of scarred midnight pelt shifting to man mid-stride, taller than Fenrir, his eyes burning with the zeal of the righteous traitor, a crown of twisted thorns marking his claim. "Brother!" Trajan spat, voice dripping venom like venomous sap from a wounded pine. "Your mercy has birthed monsters. The Pups' curse damns us all. Yield the throne, or watch Eldridge burn in the goddess's wrath." Fenrir circled him, breaths ragged, the firelight from the dying embers gilding their forms in hellish glow. Blood trickled from a fresh gash on his brow, mingling with sweat to trace paths of crimson down his face, a warrior's tears unspoken. "The curse is broken," he countered, his tone steady as ancient oaks in gale. "By grace you scorn. They shift now, whole, proof that strength lies not in war's harvest, but in the soul's quiet forge." Trajan's laugh was a bark, hollow and cruel, as he lunged, their bodies colliding in a tangle of fists and fangs, the cave trembling with the force of brothers unbound by blood's fragile tie. From the shadows, Raven watched. The Pups' whimpers piercing her like thorns, their small hands clutching her cloak as if it were the moon's own weave. The brooch burned fiercer, visions assaulting her, threads of silver snapping, the pack's elders turning from Fenrir's mercy, Trajan's rise fueled by the very shunning that had scarred the king. Her past crashed against the present, the enforcer's banishment. Their pragmatic cruelty mirroring Trajan's ambition, all rooted in fear of the broken. Eno tugged at her sleeve, his golden eyes pleading, "Help him, like you helped us." The words ignited something deep, a moral crossroads etched in her bones. Flee into freedom's wild embrace, her gift unclaimed, or step into the fray, awakening not just souls, but the pack's dormant heart, risking war's devouring maw for love's redemptive flame. She rose, the Pups at her heels, emerging into the chaos where bodies littered the entrance. Eastern wolves felled, their blood pooling in the snow like spilled ink on parchment fate. Trajan pinned Fenrir against the wall, his claws at the king's throat, victory's snarl twisting his features. "End it," he hissed, "and spare the whelps your failure." Raven's voice cut through, clear and unyielding, the brooch's light flaring to illuminate the scene like a lunar beacon. "No," she said, stepping forward, her presence a calm amid the storm, the air humming with her gift's subtle power. The betas hesitated, their aggression fracturing under the weight of her gaze, as if she unveiled the hidden paths of their loyalties, threads of doubt woven by years of Trajan's manipulations. Trajan whirled, eyes narrowing on her, recognition flickering like malice in embers. "The exiled dreamer," he sneered. "What power have you, Omega, to challenge blood?" But Fenrir seized the moment, breaking free with a surge of alpha fury, tackling his brother to the snow outside. They rolled in the drifts, fists pounding, blood blooming red against white, the wind howling their grievances to the indifferent moon. Raven knelt beside the fray, her hand extended not in violence, but in vocation, the brooch pulsing, sending ripples that touched Trajan's form, awakening echoes of their shared youth. Games in the keep's halls, Fenrir's mercy sparing a rival pup, bonds frayed by ambition's blade. Trajan faltered, a vision assailing him, his own fractures, The shunning he had internalized as strength, the pack's recoil not from weakness, but from fear's mirror. He rose, staggering, claws retracting as doubt bloomed in his eyes. "What sorcery?" he gasped, the fight draining from his limbs like meltwater from peaks. Fenrir stood over him, chest heaving, not striking the killing blow, but offering a hand scarred by the same blood. "Choose, brother, war's throne of bones, or the pack's true heart. Mercy crowns the fallen, not the conqueror." The eastern betas murmured, their howls turning to uneasy whines, the air thick with the scent of thawing allegiance. Raven felt the dilemma coil in her gut, sharp as winter's bite. Forgiveness might bind the packs in fragile peace, yet invite betrayal's shadow. War would secure freedom's edge, but drown the pup's miracle in rivers of red. Her gaze met Fenrir's across the bloodied snow, the bond pulling taut. Love as redemption's proof, not easy reward, demanding she choose between the liberty of exile and the throne's burdened grace. Trajan knelt. Head bowed, not in defeat, but revelation, the moon witnessing the first crack in empire's ice. Yet as the wind carried the pack's distant calls, loyalists and traitors converging, Raven knew the judgment was hers, a moral forge where compassion's fire might yet consume or illuminate. The cave's echoes faded into the vast hush of the wilds, but the choice lingered, a spiritual wound pulsing like the brooch's unquenched light, demanding Raven weigh her soul against the fates entwined. The snow-laden wind howled through the pass like a lament from the goddess's own throat, whipping flakes into a blinding veil that blurred the line between mercy and madness. Raven stood at the cave's threshold, the moonstone brooch a searing brand against her chest. Its light, cutting through the dawn's pallor like a vein of defiant silver in unyielding stone. The air reeked of blood and frost-bitten earth, the metallic bite sharp on her tongue, mingling with the acrid smoke from the embers that still smoldered behind her. Trajan knelt in the crimson-streaked drifts, his massive frame bowed not in surrender, but in the throes of unveiled fracture. His eyes, once burning with conquest's fire, now clouded with the ghosts of shared blood, the visions Raven's touch had forced upon him like thorns, piercing a traitor's crown. Fenrir loomed over his brother, his breath ragged plumes in the chill, claws half extended, the scars on his arms glistening with fresh red under the moon's retreating sickle. The pups huddled at Raven's skirts, their small hands clutching the frayed edges of her cloak. Eno's grip fierce, a boy's budding resolve. Veils steady, tracing the threads as if weaving protection from memory. Soren's fragile, trembling yet anchored by the warmth of her leg. The eastern betas circled uneasily, their howls silenced into whines, the pack's ancient loyalties fracturing under the weight of her gift's subtle unraveling. She had awakened not just the pups, but echoes in these warriors' souls, flashes of Trajan's youth, the mercy Fenrir had shown him in the keep's shadowed halls, sparing a rival pup from the elder's fangs when ambition first stirred like poison in his veins. Raven's heart pounded, a war drum echoing the distant thunder of converging packs, the loyalists from Eldridge's frozen spires, drawn by the bond's call and Trajan's full horde cresting the ridge like a shadow tide. The past crashed upon her in visceral waves, her own banishment, the beta enforcers' averted eyes as they shoved her beyond the warded stones, their voices a chorus of pragmatic scorn. "Useless dreamer," they had spat, recoiling from her unproven visions as if she were the curse, not the key. Now, that rejection mirrored in Trajan's faltering form, the traitor who had weaponized the pup's affliction to rally the disloyal, whispering of divine disfavor to justify his bid for the throne. He was the rival alpha, born of the same blood yet twisted by war's old wounds, his heart a forge where shame had hardened into steel. "Why?" Fenrir demanded. His voice a gravel rumble that cut through the wind, not laced with rage, but the raw ache of brotherhood betrayed. He extended a hand, scarred palm upturned, blood dripping from his knuckles to stain the snow in dark petals. Trajan's gaze lifted, meeting his brother's with a flicker of the boy he had once been, before the Eastern clan's whispers, before the shunning of the crippled whelps fueled his doctrine of strength through cull. "You ruled with mercy's blade," Trajan rasped, his words choked on the vision's residue, the silver threads Raven's brooch had illuminated. Games in the throne room's firelight, Fenrir shielding him from their father's iron fist, only for ambition to sever the bond like a claw through tendon. But mercy birthed weakness. The packs recoil from your line's fracture, the pups, proof of the goddess's scorn. I sought to end it, to forge Eldridge anew in blood's purity. The betas shifted, paws scraping snow, their eyes darting between brothers, the air humming with the scent of thawing allegiance, sweat and pine resin, undercut by the faint electric tang of Raven's awakening power. She felt it coiling within her, the Pathfinder's gift not a balm, but a scalpel, peeling back the layers of denial to expose the moral rot beneath. Her exile had been their echo, the pack's elders turning from her compassion, deeming it frailty in a world of fangs and survival, just as they had recoiled from the pups, leaving them to nursemaids' pity and the wild's indifference. Now, the confrontation swelled, the loyalists' howls joining the fray from the east, a cacophony that shook the pines, branches shedding ice like shattered illusions. Raven stepped forward, the snow crunching under her boots like brittle resolve, the brooch's heat spreading through her veins, urging her toward the heart of the storm. The pups followed, their presence a tether grounding her against the pull of freedom's wild call, the liberty of vanishing into the northern vales, her gift unclaimed, her soul unburdened by thrones and betrayals. Or this, stepping into the fray, forgiving the past's cruelties to bind the packs in redemption's fragile weave, choosing love's proof over isolation's cold embrace. Fenrir's eyes met hers across the divide, stormy depths pleading not for salvation, but alliance. The king marked by guilt, his duty a chain forged in the fires of old wars, now offering her a place not as subject, but equal in the moon's quiet decree. Trajan rose unsteadily, his betas flanking him, claws glinting in the silver light, the rival alpha's snarl returning like a shadow reclaiming ground. "She is the sorcery," he accused, pointing a bloodied finger at Raven, his voice regaining its venomous edge. "An Omega exile, peddling dreams to unravel what I've built. The packs will war regardless. Your mercy invites it, brother. Yield, or watch the whelp's miracle drown in the red snow." The words struck like claws, evoking her banishment's sting, the enforcer's final shove into the void, their recoil from her as if she were the broken one. Yet in that echo, Raven glimpsed the choice's core. Forgiveness, not as weakness, but as the true war, dismantling empires of fear with compassion's unyielding light. War would grant her freedom, a lone path through the wilds, but at the cost of the pup's fragile wholeness, Fenrir's haunted redemption, the pack's soul starved by endless claw. The packs converged then, shadows spilling over the ridge, loyalists in gray furs bearing Eldridge's iron antlers, Trajan's horde, a wave of midnight pelts scarred by eastern skirmishes. Howls clashed in visceral harmony, the wind carrying the scent of massed fury, musk and iron, fear and resolve. Fenrir positioned himself between the lines, his roar a call to stand down, but Trajan lunged, betas surging in his wake, the snow erupting in chaos, claws rending, blood arcing like crimson rain under the moon's watchful eye. Raven's vision blurred with silver threads, the brooch flaring to reveal hidden paths. Trajan's heart, not stone but wounded flesh, recoiling from his own shunning as the lesser brother. The beta's doubts, loyalties frayed by years of whispered lies. She moved through the melee, untouched by fang or fist, her presence a lunar ward that stilled the nearest combatants, awakening flickers of mercy in their eyes, visions of lost kin, foregone compassions. Eno, Vale, and Saran clung to her, their shifts holding firm, small beacons in the storm. Reaching the brothers' grapple, where Fenrir pinned Trajan amid the drifts, she knelt, hand extended to the traitor, the brooch's light bathing them in ethereal glow. "Choose," she whispered, her voice cutting through the din like moonlight on ice, not war's throne of bones, but the pack's mended heart. Forgiveness is the strength you both deny, the goddess's proof that broken souls can crown the realm. Trajan's struggle faltered, his gaze locking on hers, the visions crashing. Fenrir's mercy in youth, now mirrored in her touch, unraveling the ambition that had armored his pain. The betas hesitated, howls dying to murmurs, the pack's clash slowing as the silver threads wove doubt into unity. Yet Raven's soul tore at the seams. Love demanded this intervention, binding her to Fenrir's world of duty and guilt, sacrificing the wild's solitary freedom for redemption's burdened grace. Or war, let the claws decide, preserve her exile's purity, but condemn the miracle to oblivion. The wind screamed the dilemma, blood warm on her skin from a near miss, the moon hanging judgment as the pax teetered on the knife's edge. Her choice the forge where mercy might yet temper or shatter all. The wind's fury crested like a dirge from the goddess's veiled lips, hurling snow in blinding sheets that stung like accusations against Raven's skin, the cold a relentless scourge seeping through her cloak to claw at the marrow of her bones. The moonstone brooch blazed against her chest, a furious heart of silver fire, its light fracturing the chaos of the ridge into shards of revelation, claws frozen mid-strike, howls choked into gasps, blood steaming in crimson blooms across the white expanse. Trajan's form thrashed beneath Fenrir's unyielding grip, the brothers locked in a tangle of sinew and scar, their breaths ragged symphonies of shared ruin, the metallic reek of spilled life thick in the air, mingling with the pine's sharp resin and the distant, mournful uivos of packs teetering on the abyss. Raven's pulse thundered in her ears, a visceral roar that drowned the clash of fangs and the crack of ice under paw, her body a conduit for the brooch's unbridled surge, visions cascading like lunar waterfalls, unveiling the silver threads that bound not just the pups to her, but the fractured realm to its hidden core. Eno pressed against her thigh, his small chest heaving with the scent of fear-soured sweat. Vale's fingers dug into her palm, nails drawing pinpricks of blood that welled warm before the frost claimed them. Soren whimpered, his fragile frame trembling as if the earth's own quakes echoed in his bones. She had birthed their shifts from exile's shadow, yet this moment demanded more, a sacrifice etched in her soul's quiet forge, where freedom's solitary path warred with the redemptive union that could heal the pack's wounds or drown them in deeper crimson. Fenrir's eyes found hers through the melee, stormy depths raw with the king's melancholic plea, his face a map of guilt carved by years of duty's iron yoke, the shunning of his pups, the betrayals sown in mercy's fertile soil, the throne that weighed heavier than any crown of antlers. Blood trickled from his split lip, tracing a path down his jaw like tears withheld, his broad frame heaving not from exertion alone, but the ethical precipice of kinslaying. Trajan snarled beneath him, the rival alpha's eyes wild with the visions Raven's light had inflicted, echoes of boyhood mercy, Fenrir's hand sparing him from their father's wrath, now twisted into the armor of ambition that recoiled from its own reflection. "End it," Trajan rasped, voice breaking like brittle ice, his betas circling closer, their fur matted with gore, loyalty fraying like the hem of her cloak. The dilemma coiled in Raven's gut, sharp as a blade's kiss. War's freedom. A lone wolf's exile into the northern vales, her gift unclaimed and unscarred, preserving the pup's miracle in secrecy's hush. Or this, forgiveness as the ultimate proof, stepping into the bond with Fenrir, weaving her awakening power into the pack's torn weave, choosing compassion's flame over power's devouring maw. Her rejection replayed in visceral strokes, the enforcers shove into the wilds, their averted gazes mirroring the realm's recoil from the broken, deeming her useless as they had the pups. Yet in that echo, she glimpsed the rebirth. Love not as reward, but redemption's trial, rationalized in her mind as folly, resisted in the instinctive pull toward Fenrir's haunted grace, finally accepted as the moon's inexorable decree. She surged forward, the snow yielding like a confessor under her boots, the brooch's heat spreading through her veins like molten silver, igniting the air with a palpable hum that stilled the nearest combatants, their claws retracting, eyes glazing with unveiled truths. The eastern betas faltered, visions assailing them, lost siblings shunned in mercy's name, paths untrod where compassion had been culled as weakness. Loyalists from Eldridge paused mid-lunge, the silver threads illuminating their doubts, the goddess's symbols flickering in the snow, faint outlines of lunar roses etched in frost, blooming where blood had fallen. Raven knelt between the brothers, her hand extending not to strike but to bridge, palm upturned in the ancient gesture of sanctuary, the brooch's glow enveloping them like a shroud of ethereal light. "Enough," she commanded, her voice a poetic thunder, resonant with the night's spiritual cadence, cutting through the wind's howl like moonlight piercing storm clouds. The power flowed unbidden, a tidal wave of awakening that crashed over Trajan, unraveling the last veils of his denial, his own fractures laid bare, the shunning that had forged him into a mirror of the pack's fear, not their strength. He convulsed, not in agony but release, bones shifting subtly as buried mercy stirred, his snarl dissolving into a guttural sob, tears freezing on his lashes amid the red-streaked drifts. Fenrir released him, rising unsteadily, his hand finding Raven's shoulder, a touch resisted in her core, rationalized as duty's chain, yet blooming into acceptance's quiet fire, the alpha's guilt thawing in the warmth of her resolve. The packs converged in hushed awe, howls fading to a collective breath held, the ridge transforming under the moon's gaze from battlefield to temple, torches guttering like hesitant stars, shadows yielding to the brooch's radiant weave. Trajan knelt fully now, head bowed, his betas mirroring the gesture, allegiance shifting not through conquest's blood, but the moral alchemy of forgiveness. "Sister in blood," he murmured, voice hoarse with rebirth's raw edge. "Your light. It unmakes the lies I armored." Fenrir drew her close, his arm a bulwark against the wind, the bond sealing in that instant, not immediate passion, but a tragic union forged in pain's crucible, his melancholic eyes reflecting her own renascent fire. The pups rushed forward, embracing the trio, their laughter a fragile melody piercing the silence, bodies whole and spirits unbound, the curse shattered like ice under spring's first thaw. Raven felt the sacrifice keenly, the wild's call receding, her exile's freedom traded for this burdened grace. Yet in the union's embrace, rebirth unfurled, the packs kneeling as one, the moonstone brooch cooling to a steady pulse, symbol of destinies mended. Blood and snow mingled into sacred earth, fire's distant glow from Eldridge's spires beckoning like a promise, the goddess's symbols etching permanence in the frost, roses of silver, wolves in harmonious silhouette. Love had proven itself, not in triumph's roar, but in mercy's quiet crown, healing the realm's wounds where power had only deepened them. Fenrir's hand lingered on hers, a vow unspoken, as the wind softened to a whisper, carrying the northern wilds toward dawn's redemptive light. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe, because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.